negotiations. Unfortunately, we still hear in this room false narrative and misrepresentations. We will spare no efforts to help build a just and lasting peace, respectful of the independence and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The situation in the Middle East is also a source of grave concern. It is urgent to reach an agreement on ceasefire in Gaza and liberation of all hostages by Hamas. We support the ongoing mediation efforts and call on the parties to refrain from action that could lead to further escalation. Italy considers the two-state solution the only possible way to get to a sustainable and durable peace in the Middle East, to offer a future of hope to the entire region, in line with Oslo agreements. Africa is also affected by multiple crises and conflicts. In Sudan, we urge an immediate cessation of hostilities in the catastrophic civil war, to be followed by an inclusive political process to preserve the country's territorial integrity. We also remain strongly engaged in the Sahel to combat terrorism and illegal trafficking, as well as to support rule of law in the region. A stronger partnership with Africa is a top priority for Italy. We are implementing the Mattei Plan, our national initiative closely interpointed with the European Global Gateway, and G7 Partnership for Investment Infrastructure. In addition to the various flagship projects in the 14 pilot countries within the Mattei Plan, we are now launching an initiative for debt swaps in Africa. Funds deriving from the conversion will be used to further finance sustainable development in partner countries. In conclusion, Italy is strongly committed to work in all relevant fora for the stabilization of areas of crisis, promote sustainable development, and address the root causes of displacement and mass migration flows. The G20 has a significant role to play in the respect, and we are ready to further engage within this framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Italy. We now go to Japan. His Excellency, Mr. Takeshi Iwai, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan.
Thank you, Minister Lavrov, fellow ministers, distinguished guests. First, I would like to express my respect for South Africa's effort as the G20 presidency. Today, the international community is facing multiple crises caused by major challenges to the rule of law, notably Russia's aggression against Ukraine, as well as global issues. Against this backdrop, we need to identify common ground and points of agreement rather than division and confrontation, and with that, we should take the lead in solving these issues in a way that all members share responsibility. Japan has been promoting effort in the areas of peace and sustainable development, which are also today's theme, by attaching great importance, guided by the principle of human security. Japan has been taking the lead in addressing global issues such as poverty, disaster, infectious diseases, and climate change. Furthermore, in the age of multiple crises, it has become increasingly important to realize quality growth aligned with the times, which is achieved through, one, strengthening socio-economic autonomy and resilience, including food, energy, as well as economic securities. Two, developing quality infrastructure. And three, efforts in areas such as digital. Japan, as a nation at the forefront of addressing challenges, will share its knowledge on issues such as declining birth rate, and aging population, as well as disaster, with the international community. In doing so, Japan will work collaboratively to realize a sustainable economy and society beyond 2030. This was published in this year's Voluntary National Review, VNR, on the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, as well. Japan attaches great importance to disaster risk reduction, critical minerals, and debt issues among the priority issues raised by South Africa, the G20 presidency. Regarding disaster risk reduction, Japan will share its expertise and technologies developed through experiencing numerous disasters with the international community. Japan will thereby contribute to reducing risks of and enhancing responses to disasters that have become more severe and frequent. Regarding critical minerals, aiming for stable supply by strengthening the resilience of supply chains, Japan will promote effort that contributes to the realization of responsible critical minerals supply chains. This will be done in a manner that complies with labor standards, ensures measures against bribery and corruption, and considers the impact on the environment. Addressing the debt issues faced by developing countries is critical for sustainable development. It is also important to speed up the debt restructuring process of the G20 Common Framework, further ensure debt transparency, and mobilize private finance. The G20 summit will be held for the first time in Africa this year, and thus cooperation with Africa is important. In August, Japan hosted the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD-9, which underscored the importance of private sector-led sustainable growth, the empowerment of youth and women, as well as enhanced regional integration and cross-regional connectivity. Japan remains committed to advancing concrete initiatives in partnership with Africa. Japan will advance its cooperation with international organizations, including the UN, at its 80th anniversary, as well as the G20 members, to co-create practical solutions aligned with the times. We will also continue to actively contribute for the successful G20 summit in Johannesburg. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Japan. We now go to the Republic of Korea. His Excellency, Mr. Chung Hyun, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Korea.
Thank you, Minister Lamolle. Excellencies, distinguished guests, I commend South Africa's leadership in bringing us together once again in this chamber. As the United Nations turns 80, we celebrate its legacy while also facing the urgent task of restoring its effectiveness and reaffirming its relevance amid profound global transitions. At this critical juncture, both the United Nations and the G20 must rise to the challenges. Now, completing its full presidency cycle, the G20 has proven its significance, born to safeguard stability and capable of turning dialogue into action and ideas into solution. At this crossroads, one truth is clear. Only with peace will we achieve sustainability and prosperity. This requires the right priorities. First, peace with dialogue. As an elected member of the United Nations Security Council, Korea is committed to advancing peace and addressing conflicts that demand our collective attention. Earlier this week, I chaired council briefings on Ukraine and on Gaza. The exchanges were complex, yet they ensured diplomacy remains possible. Just as these crises require sustained dialogue, Korea also bears the responsibility of advancing peace on its own peninsula. Korea is committed to dialogue and preventive diplomacy and will work to restore trust and peace with North Korea in pursuit of a future of shared prosperity. Second, peace endures with development. As reaffirmed in July G20 Development Ministerial Declaration, time is running out on the 2030 agenda. With less than 5 years left, urgency must turn into action. Financing gap for the SDGs is widening. The importance of effective development cooperation and partnership cannot be overstated. Korea has been promoting knowledge sharing and monitoring for development effectiveness. We will host the 8th Busan Global Partnership Forum next week, building on the outcome of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development as a platform dedicated to development effectiveness. Korea stands ready to work hand in hand with all partners to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 agenda. Third, peace evolves through innovation. Technology is reshaping the fabric of security and development. Whether it becomes a driver of prosperity for all depends on how we harness it. We must therefore deepen partnership between the public and private sectors, harness innovation for peace and development, and connect with businesses and entrepreneurs. In this light, Korea welcomes South Africa's decision to establish a G20 task force on AI and data governance. In addition, Korea will host the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in Gyeongju, where we aim to adopt the AI initiative for the innovative AI transformation. We hope these efforts will also enrich the G20's deliberations. Excellencies, the G20 does not replace the universality of the United Nations. Rather, it reinforces it by upholding consensus and generating momentum in this turbulent era. Korea stands ready to work with all of you to ensure that multilateralism endures, peace remains at the center, and the path to sustainable development stays open to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Republic of Korea will now go to Mexico. His Excellency Mr. Juan Ramon de la Fuente Ramirez, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mexico. You now have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Ministro Lamola.
Thank you very much,
Minister Lavrov,
distinguidos
colleagues,
invitados,
distinguished
México
guests,
agradece a la
Mexico is
presidencia
grateful to
sudafricana
the South
por
African
convocar esta
presidency for
segunda
having
reunión de
convened
ministros de
this second
Relaciones
meeting
Exteriores del
of
G20
foreign
que
ministers
nos
of the
ofrece
G20
la
countries, which
oportunidad de
presents us with an
reflexionar
opportunity to
sobre el
think
papel de la
about
ONU y
the
la
role of the
responsabilidad
UN
que
and
tenemos
the
de
responsibility that we
fortalecerla
have
en
to
beneficio
strengthen
de
it
nuestros
for the
pueblos.
benefit of our peoples.
Estos tiempos de
These
cambios
times
sistémicos que
of
afectan la
systemic
paz y la
change that
estabilidad
affect
en
peace
diferentes
and
regiones,
stability in
el medio
various
ambiente y la
regions, as
justicia
well as the
social,
environment and social
requieren de
justice,
acciones
call
más
for
efectivas
more effective
y
action
acaso también más
and
concertadas
perhaps more
para ser
concerted
más
action
efectivas.
if we're to be
En todo
more
caso,
effective.
las desigualdades entre países y al interior de
Inequalities
estos persisten
between and
y los
within
límites del
countries
orden
are
internacional
persisting,
actual
and we're
son
seeing the
cada vez más
limitations
evidentes.
of the
En
global
este
order.
contexto,
In
el
this
G20
context,
constituye
the
una voz
G20 has
cuyo peso
a
debe
voice
destacar con más fuerza
through
la
which
importancia
we
del
should
multilateralismo
stress more
como una respuesta más
vocally
eficaz
the
a los desafíos globales.
importance of
El
multilateralism
grupo
as
tiene
the
la
only
capacidad de
effective response
contribuir
to
a
global
fortalecer
challenges.
las
And this
instituciones
group has the
multilaterales
ability to
para
contribute to
hacerlas
strengthening
más
multilateral
transparentes,
institutions, to
más
make them more
responsables
transparent,
y más influyentes.
more responsible, and more
Al
influential.
reafirmar nuestro respaldo a la ONU,
We
reiteramos
reiterate
también
our support for
que
the
se
UN,
requiere de
and we
una
also
reforma
reiterate that we
profunda
need
de sus
to
estructuras,
engage in
sus
wide-ranging
mandatos
reform of its
y su
structures,
funcionamiento.
its mandates, and the way in which it
Respaldamos la
works.
iniciativa ONU
We
80
support
del secretario
the
general,
Secretary General's
pero la
UNGA80
revitalización
initiative,
tanto de la
but
Asamblea
the
General como
revitalization
del
of the General
Consejo de
Assembly
Seguridad
and the Security
son
Council
impostergables.
are
Junto con
actions that
Indonesia,
can't now be
Jordania,
postponed.
Kenia, Noruega,
Along with
Nueva
Indonesia,
Zelanda,
Jordan,
Senegal y
Kenya,
Singapur,
Norway, New Zealand, Senegal, and
establecimos un
Singapore,
grupo
we have
UNGA80
established
Global
a
para incidir
UNGA80 global group
constructivamente en esta
to
iniciativa del
contribute
secretario general
constructively to
con el
that
objetivo de
SG
fortalecer
initiative
el
with a view to
multilateralismo,
strengthening
el derecho
multilateralism,
internacional y
international
la
law,
ONU en su conjunto.
and the UN
Pero
as a whole.
insisto, se necesita
But,
una reforma multilateral
repeat, we
más
need
amplia que
broader
asegure que
multilateral
las
reform
estructuras de la
that
gobernanza
will
global
ensure that the
sean
structures of
más
global
relevantes
governance
y
be
para ello tienen que
more
ser más
relevant,
inclusivas
and to be more
y
relevant,
más
they need to be more
efectivas para poder
inclusive
enfrentar
and more
estos
effective
retos globales.
in enabling us
Promovemos
to tackle
activamente la
global
implementación del
challenges.
Pacto
We
para el
are
futuro
actively
para
promoting
que
the
sus acuerdos
implementation of the
formen
Pact for
parte
the
de las
future,
reformas del
so
secretario
that
general
the agreements
bajo la
within
iniciativa
that
ONU
be
80
part of
y
the Secretary
apoyamos la
General's
instrumentación
reforms under the
del
UNGA80
panel sobre
initiative.
inteligencia
And we
artificial
support
y
the
su
use
diálogo
of the panel on
multiactor en
artificial
cumplimiento de
intelligence
los
and the
acuerdos del Pacto
multi-stakeholder
Mundial
dialogue,
Digital, convencidos de que la
in
gobernanza tecnológica
achieving the
es
agreements under the
indispensable
Global
para la
Digital
paz
Compact,
y el
because we're
desarrollo
convinced that
sostenible.
technology
El
governance
G20,
is
colegas,
crucial
tiene la
for peace and
capacidad
sustainable
de
development.
respaldar estos
The
esfuerzos y
G20 has the
responder
capacity
a las
to
crisis
support those
estructurales que
efforts
afectan a
and
la
responding
economía
to
y
the
al
structural
desarrollo.
crises that are
Su
affecting
papel
the
es pues
economy and
clave
development.
para promover
It has
soluciones
a pivotal role
colectivas
to play
y
in
fortalecer la
promoting collective
confianza
solutions,
en el
strengthening
sistema
trust in
multilateral.
the multilateral
Muchas gracias.
system and supporting the UN. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Mexico. We now go to Saudi Arabia. His Royal Highness Prince Faisal bin Farah Al Said, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Excellency. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معالي الرئيس رونالد لامولا وزير خارجية جنوب أفريقيا. أصحاب السمو المعالي وزراء الخارجية الحضور الكرام السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Ministers of Foreign Affairs, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would like to express its heartfelt gratitude to the South African presidency of the G20. For the first time, we have a chair from the African continent. We wish you every success, and we hope to be able to achieve our common interests, the interests of the entire world, solidarity, sustainability, and cooperation. That's the theme. We need to strengthen international cooperation and international multilateral institutions, first and foremost the United Nations and the G20. These institutions are key platforms necessary for us to tackle political and economic challenges we face in the international arena. Mr. Chairman, the United Nations is celebrating its 80th anniversary. Therefore, it's necessary for us to strengthen the organization to ensure that it is up to the task of addressing present-day challenges. We need to strengthen constructive cooperation and dialogue to this end. Development cannot prevail when there is conflict. The role of the G20 is to address various issues, whether they be economic or political, with a view to achieving sustainable development internationally and regionally. Forging peace is a key pillar for economic development and for ensuring that we have an environment that's conducive to attracting more investment and to establishing partnerships as well as strengthening international cooperation. Digital transformation is also a key component we need to harness so as to guarantee greater participation of all sectors of our societies, in particular women and children. Over the last few years, what we've demonstrated is that the challenges we face know no borders. In order to tackle those challenges, we need multilateral cooperation underpinned by common responsibility. Today's world is plagued by inequality, economic disruption, and this has corrosive consequences for millions of people. There are also regional and international tensions and violations of international law. All of these issues are undercutting peace and security, thwarting the achievement of sustainable development. Despite these conflicts, the current status of the global economy, despite all this, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we managed to maintain our economic flexibility and to maintain our non-oil GDP levels, as well as to combat unemployment. We've coordinated our economic policies at the international level so as to achieve market stability and to protect vulnerable countries from deleterious economic and social consequences thereof. Mr. Chairman, we need to coordinate the work of the G20 and the UN so as to better grapple with global governance issues on the economic front. This cooperation between our two organizations will help us to tackle economic challenges and to build the international community's capacity to support developing countries, as well as to achieve sustained and sustainable growth. We stand ready to cooperate, working hand in hand with all of our partners for the benefit of all of our countries. We bear a common responsibility, that is recommitting to the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. We must work towards a more inclusive, transparent world order based on parity, one that responds to the aspirations of our people. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is ready to strengthen these bonds so that we can achieve international peace and security. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We now go to take here Her Excellency Ms. Beris Ekin, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey. You now have the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, I thank South Africa for convening this timely meeting in such an inclusive format. It's only through open and comprehensive dialogue that we can address today's complex challenges. The ultimate purpose of our work, whether within the UN or the G20, is the welfare of humanity. Yet, welfare cannot be measured solely in economic terms. Peace and development are intrinsically linked, and neither can truly exist without the other. Today, we confront an unsettling reality. Conflicts are longer, deadlier, and more widespread than at any point in recent history. International law and humanitarian principles are systematically breached. Terrorism continues to claim innocent lives. Racism and xenophobia erode social harmony. Impunity and lack of accountability undermine trust in institutions. It is in this sobering context that we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Born out of the determination to save future generations from the scourge of war, the UN has at times fallen short of this noble mission. The tragedy in Gaza reveals this stark reality. The paralysis of the Security Council has undermined the credibility of the organization as a whole. Yet, the principles and purposes of the UN Charter remain as vital as they were 8 decades ago. The UN continues to be the cornerstone of international legitimacy. As the primary forum of the world's major economies, G20 must work in synergy with the UN to foster peace, security, and sustainable development through economic growth. In this regard, we welcome the UNGA80 initiative and commend the Secretary General's efforts to strengthen the organization. At 80, the UN deserves not only commemoration, but also renewal. As we are reflecting on the performance of the first cycle of G20 presidencies, the G20 must be part of that renewal as well. Turkey remains committed to a fairer, up-to-date, responsive, and effective global governance with the UN at its center. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tekia. We now go to the United Kingdom. Her Excellency, Ms. Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary. You now have the floor.
Thank you. Can I thank South Africa for your leadership during the G20 presidency and express our support for the priorities you have driven through. Earlier today, Foreign Minister Lamola and I hosted a session on the upcoming Global Fund replenishment, and we will continue to support that. I see the Russian representative is leaving his seat because he does not want to hear the response to his illegal war of aggression towards Ukraine. Let us be clear, it is an unprovoked war of aggression that is not just a disgraceful assault on Ukraine's security and resilience. It is an assault on the UN Charter's fundamental principles and respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, and no amount of false fantasy world distortions, misinformation and propaganda from the Russian representative about the causes of the war will convince anyone. And I say to the Russian Federation, your actions are clear for all to see, attacking not just the courageous country of Ukraine, but the UN Charter's fundamental principles. It will not succeed. The United Kingdom, alongside countries across the world, will continue to stand in solidarity with Ukraine. Can I thank the South Africa for your work to pursue peace and to make those the fundamental principles behind your G20 presidency. We will continue to support you on the replenishment of the Global Fund, which we seek to achieve in time for the November G20 summit, because as a result of that work, children are no longer growing up as orphans. Millions of parents no longer face early bereavement because 70 million lives have been saved from HIV, TB and malaria. We will continue to support reform of the international financial system, including calling for greater voice and representation for low-income and vulnerable countries in the World Bank and IMF. But crucially too, we will support, and the whole of the G20 should support, the peace where it is so desperately needed in Sudan and in Gaza. This week, the UK has made the historic decision to recognise the state of Palestine to keep alive a two-state solution, but it must be a spur, not a substitute, for much-needed ceasefire, a release of the hostages and desperately needed humanitarian aid. The United Nations came together around peace. The G20 comes together around multilateral institutions to support prosperity, to support security, and to support that collaboration across the globe. We support those principles and we must keep all of them alive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the United Kingdom. We now go to India. His Excellency, Mr. S. Shankar, the Minister of External Affairs of India. You now have the floor, my dear brother.
Minister Lamola, Excellencies, colleagues, I join other members in thanking you, Minister, for convening this meeting and reaffirm India's support for the priorities of the South African G20 presidency. Colleagues, our focus today is on the correlation between international peace and global development. In recent times, that is well established, as both deteriorated in parallel. The costs, especially to the global south, in terms of energy, food, and fertilizer security, were starkly demonstrated by ongoing conflicts, particularly in Ukraine and Gaza. Apart from jeopardizing supplies and logistics, access and costs themselves became pressure points on nations. Double standards are clearly in evidence. Excellencies, peace can certainly enable development, but by threatening development, we cannot facilitate peace. Making energy and other essentials more uncertain in an economically fragile situation helps no one. Therefore, the way out is to move the needle towards dialogue and diplomacy, not in the opposite direction towards further complications. In any conflict situation, there will be a few who have the ability to engage both sides. Such countries can be utilized by the international community, both to achieve peace and to maintain it thereafter. So even as we attempt to address complex threats to peace, the value of encouraging a buy-in from those supportive of such goals should be appreciated. A persistent threat to development is that perennial disruptor of peace, terrorism. It is imperative that the world display neither tolerance nor accommodation to terrorist activities. Given the extensive networking among terrorists, those who act against them on any front actually render a larger service to the international community as a whole. As we confront conflict, economic pressures, and terrorism, the limitations of multilateralism and the United Nations in particular are visible. The need for reforming multilateralism has never been greater. Colleagues, the international situation is today both politically and economically volatile. We, as members of G20, have a particular responsibility to strengthen its stability and give it a more positive direction. That is best done by undertaking dialogue and diplomacy, by firmly combating terrorism, and by appreciating the need for stronger energy and economic security. I thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear brother, also for sticking to the 3 minutes rule. We now go to the guest countries. We start with the Netherlands. His Excellency Mr. Dirk Schoof, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to President Ramaphosa and Minister Lamola for hosting this G20 meeting for all UN members. We certainly feel at home here. After all, the Netherlands is often associated with flowers, such as our famous tulips, so we can appreciate South Africa G20 logo, which features the beautiful King Proteo flower. Above all, we appreciate the message that South Africa conveys through this flower, one of renewal and hope. It inspires us to participate actively in forums like the G20 and the UN. With so much at stake in the world, these platforms are vital ways of strengthening mutual understanding and fostering collaboration on global economic governance and other key issues. The Netherlands firmly believes in the importance of a robust multilateral system, one that ensures interstate predictability and enables people and companies to flourish. However, to keep this system fit for purpose, we have to protect, strengthen and reform it. But we need to approach this from a range of perspectives. We must recognize that sustainable economic development is impossible without peace. And in turn, there can be no lasting peace without inclusive, sustainable development. The conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan and elsewhere show how violence destroys human potential disrupts trade, and fuels poverty. This underlines the importance of the G20 addressing not only economic growth, but all these other challenges as well. The G20 has immense convening power as it represents a vast majority of the global economy and population. With that comes responsibility. Let us use this platform to ensure that our economic strategies reinforce peace and that peace-building efforts pave the way for broad, sustainable prosperity. The Netherlands is committed to advancing this agenda during the current and future G20 presidencies, and I look forward to attending the G20 Leaders Summit in November and the G20s to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, and also for associating with our beautiful national flower. Thank you very much. We now move to Algeria. His Excellency, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, the Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, National Community Abroad, and African Affairs of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Algeria commends South Africa for its leadership of the G20 and values its tireless efforts in championing strategic priorities that deeply resonate with Africa's needs, aspirations, and vision for progress. With South Africa's stewardship and the African Union's full membership, we believe that the G20 is fully able to lead the global transformative agenda for the common good. Against this background, Algeria wishes to highlight the following. First, as we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, we must work together to preserve what can be fairly described as the most sacred and most precious heritage of mankind. This heritage includes, notably, the United Nations itself and all that it embodies in terms of international law, multilateralism, and the global cooperation and interdependence. Second, the growing awareness about the injustices and imbalances of the current global governance must lead to concrete reforms. Africa must no longer remain on the margins of the world. The Security Council and the three Bretton Woods institutions must undergo comprehensive reforms to end decades-long of historical injustices inflicted upon our continent. Third, Africa's rightful place in shaping the future global economy must be secured and promoted. Every effort must be made to ensure that Africa is not left behind. The ongoing transformative revolutions that are reshaping the global economy in critical fields such as digitalization, robotics, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and renewable energy. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Algeria. We now move to Egypt. His Excellency, Mr. Badr Albert Dalti, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Immigration, Egyptian expatriates.
شكرا جزيلا معالي الأخ العزيز رونالد لامولا وزير العلاقات الخارجية والتعاون بجمهورية جنوب أفريقيا الشقيقة، أصحاب المعالي وزراء خارجية الدول الأعضاء والدول الضيوف بمجموعة ال20، السيدات والسادة، بداية أود أن أتوجه خالص الشكر إلى أخي معالي السيد رونالد لامولا على دعوته لعقد هذا الاجتماع، وأن أثمن الجهود الحثيثة لجمهورية جنوب أفريقيا الشقيقة بقيادتها الحكيمة لأعمال مجموعة ال20 العام الجاري.
We applaud South Africa's remarkable leadership of the G20 over the course of the past year. We're very proud that South Africa has led the G20 despite the unprecedented challenges
بمقر الأمم المتحدة وبالتزامن مع مرور
currently
80 عاما على تأسيس هذا المحفل.
We're meeting today at the UN at a time when we're commemorating the 80th anniversary of that organisation, which is the crux of multilateral action, and that shows the importance that the G20 attaches to this forum, whose charter reposes on the principles of peaceful coexistence of all peoples. However, the abject aggression of Israel against the Gaza Strip, with its many violations and the many atrocities, is a flagrant violation of international law, which is testing the United Nations, because the international community had previously, has till now been unable to resolve that conflict. The Gaza population is denied basic amenities, and I'd like to recall the ongoing position of Egypt, which is a categorical refusal of the rejection of the displacement of the population of Gaza, and we call for unhindered and immediate supply of humanitarian assistance, and the rejection of any attempt to annex the West Bank. We also call for economic rebuilding of Gaza, which many of our partners are calling for, because that will promote the ongoing presence of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. We will pursue our efforts to achieve a fair resolution of the Palestinian issue with a view to creating a Palestinian state. The challenges that multilateralism faces have a negative impact on the global economy and make it difficult to achieve the SDGs. This calls for a holistic approach to redress the structural imbalances that currently affect the global economic order, if we're to increase the effectiveness of the Bretton Woods institutions, while also solving the issue of sovereign debt of developing countries and reform multilateral financial architectures. We also reaffirm the importance of reforming the Security Council so that it be more democratic and more representative, ensuring justice for the African continent. In terms of multilateral action, Egypt has welcomed a meeting on food security under the aegis of the G20, and that's extremely important for developing countries and least developed countries. This reflects the active role that Egypt is playing in that regard, and its commitment to promoting multilateral action for the well-being of peoples. May this meeting help promote the multilateral framework with a view to a better future for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Egypt. We now go to Ireland. His Excellency Mr. Darren O'Brien, the Minister for Climate, Energy and Environment. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, Minister Lamola, and I join with colleagues in congratulating you on South Africa's presidency of the G20, your leadership and the great programme for this year. Ireland associates itself with the statement delivered by the European Union. This week we celebrate 80 years since the signing of the UN Charter, when leaders agreed to practice tolerance and live together in peace as good neighbours. 8 decades later, the international legal order and the multilateral system remains our greatest hope for a more peaceful, stable and prosperous world. However, this system, which has delivered so much peace, development and prosperity, is under immense strain. In full violation of the UN Charter, Russia continues its war of aggression in Ukraine, intensifying its attacks on Ukraine's towns, cities and civilians. And we reject the misrepresentation by the Russian delegation. Russia is the aggressor, and it could make peace at any time it chooses not to do so. We see egregious breaches of human rights and international law in Gaza, famine and people killed desperately seeking food. We call for an immediate ceasefire, the release of hostages and humanitarian access at scale into Gaza. In these and other conflicts, including in Africa, where the conflict in Sudan has created an appalling humanitarian crisis, we continue to witness the disregard of international law and the UN Charter. In too many parts of the world, we see human rights undermined, growing inequality and lack of development, the promise of the SDGs unfulfilled, pushback against gender equality and discrimination, and worse, against LGBTIQ+ persons and other minorities. The international legal order is essential for all states, and particularly small states like Ireland, to live in security and to continue to prosper. Our commitment to multilateralism is as strong as it was when we joined the UN 70 years ago. This commitment is demonstrated through our proud record in peacekeeping. Our belief in multilateralism continues to guide our actions. This is why we have put ourselves forward for a seat on the Human Rights Council from 2027 to 2029. Through our diplomacy, our humanitarian and development assistance and our peacekeepers, Ireland continues to be a strong, consistent and principled advocate for peace, human rights and the principles of the UN Charter. We have in Ireland lived experience, illustrating that the most intractable conflict can be resolved through painstaking commitment to negotiation, dialogue and compromise. The common challenges we face, whether it be climate change, conflict and fragility, violations of human rights, inequality or lack of development, can only be solved through shared solutions. The G20 has an important contribution to make. We recognise the close relationship between peace and economic development. When peace arrives, it lowers risks and barriers for companies seeking to do business, opening up new markets for local entrepreneurs and foreign investors alike. This helps to ensure not just sustainable economic development, but also a sustainable peace. These values have guided our active engagement in the work of the G20 this year as a guest country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much to Ireland. We now go to Nigeria. His Excellency Mr. Yusuf Maitima Tuga, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Minister Lamola. Nigeria commends the South Africa G20 presidency for the initiative of convening the second G20 Foreign Ministers Meeting on the margins of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly. The theme of the meeting, the United Nations at 80, reaffirming peace as a path to sustainable economic development, underscores the nexus between peace and sustainable development. Today, our world is confronted with rising geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainty, humanitarian crises, and conflict in Asia, Europe, and Africa. The G20 must seek to work more closely with the UN to deepen commitments to the peaceful resolution of conflicts and the promotion of constructive dialogue as fundamental tools for global peace and security, especially in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, where tensions continue to rise. Nigeria firmly believes in investing in mediation and other conflict prevention initiatives. We reiterate our calls for G20 member states to strengthen its dispute settlement mechanism, including provision of humanitarian assistance and support for African-led peace initiatives that address conflicts and their roots. The use of non-African private military companies and proxies ultimately fails. Alongside these challenges, terrorism and violent extremism continue to pose significant threats to global peace. Nigeria recognizes that tackling these threats requires a comprehensive approach to address both the immediate security concerns and the underlying socio-economic drivers. Furthermore, developmental challenges and poverty alleviation must remain at the center of our global agenda, as sustainable investments in education, healthcare, and job creation are critical to ensuring long-term stability and prosperity for all. We must also be honest about representation and decision-making. The G20 has proven to be an effective platform for economic cooperation, but if multilateral agencies are to remain relevant in a more complex world, we need reform that ensures greater inclusion, particularly for African nations, as we work towards a more equitable global order. This also informs our advocacy for support from the G20 for just geographical representation in the United Nations Security Council and for Africa to be given permanent seats. Prescriptions should match diagnosis, but that can only be achieved if the patient is part of the conversation. Youthful Nigeria is set to become the third largest country in the world in the next 25 years. Mr. Chair, I conclude by reaffirming Nigeria's resolve and commitment to work in the G20 with all partners for an inclusive, prosperous future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear brother from Nigeria. We now go to Norway. His Excellency, Mr. Espen Barth Eide, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway. You now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Minister Lamola, and I want to commend you as well for the excellent chairmanship of the G20 and also for convening us here today. Since this is the second time after Brazil did the same thing last year, this is now a tradition. I hope it is a tradition that will last, that we meet here as the foreign ministers of the G20 meet here. Multilateralism is being challenged very seriously. Just at a time where we need it more than ever, we have significant things to deal with in our world. And the theme chosen by South Africa for today's meeting is fundamental. Without peace, we cannot achieve sustainable economic development, and without sustainable economic development, we cannot make peace last. This is true in Gaza, it's true in Sudan, it's true in Ukraine, and in so many other places. And as wars are man-made, they can also be ended by wise people. For the UN to live up to today's challenges, we have to open up for significant reform. There is nothing wrong with the norms and principles on which the UN is formed. We don't need to reform the principles. But we do need to look into, after 80 years, whether the institutional expression, whether the organization has grown too big, too large, and too diverse for focusing on what is most important. And we need to engage in that discussion in a very creative manner. And I say that from a country who really believes in multilateralism, who really believes in the United Nations, and really believe in international law. We must make sure that the organization is fit for purpose, but reflecting on the core principles that was there from the outset. This is true for the UN, it's also true for other institutions. The international financial institutions should be part of this conversation. And I would also like to say that it would be really, really appropriate that the G20 helps the important work of reforming the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is there. Most global trade, contrary to what many people think, is still based on WTO rules, on the most favored nation principle. But we cannot be complacent. Status quo is simply not an option. We need reform also in the WTO. We need to come together as countries to show support for strong reform as suggested by the Director General. We need to be specific, we need to be creative, we need to stand up against unfair trading practices, we need to become more transparent, we need to make sure that the organization provides for a level playing field. I mention this because it's separate from the UN reform, but it is an intrinsic part of making the multilateral system work better. And precisely in a time of crisis, we should remember the saying that in crisis there is also opportunity. And if that is true, this is really the time to try to reap that opportunity, to come together. If some countries become less responsible, others must become more responsible, and we need to come together to make this a better world by strengthening the institutions, finding 21st century solution, but also take the cue from the founding fathers and mothers who had very good instincts why they set up this United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now go to Singapore. His Excellency, Mr. Vivian Balakrishnan, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for the privilege. It's easy to follow Norway. I often tell him that we can exchange our speeches and no one will know the difference. So I associate myself with everything my brother has said. I'm honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the Global Governance Group. We call ourselves the 3G, which is an informal and diverse grouping of 30 small and medium-sized states. Our global order is undergoing fundamental shifts. That's not new. But in such uncertain times, it's all the more reason that we need a rules-based multilateral system. And the G20, that represents the major players, in fact has additional responsibility to keep our rules-based multilateral system working and fit for purpose. And I want to commend South Africa's approach, and in fact, following the tradition of Brazil, to open up the G20 Foreign Ministers Meeting to all UN member states. This embodies the principle of open and flexible multilateralism. We also commend South Africa's presidency's theme of solidarity, equality, and sustainability, and your focus on fostering international cooperation in key areas of concern, including the need to mobilize predictable financing for development and supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises, which remain critical drivers of economic growth and, importantly, job creation. The 3G also encourages the G20 to collaborate more closely with the UN in these and other areas, including making the plug for the WTO, as Norway has just done. The G20 at 20 review is timely. International institutions need to adapt to our new realities, and the UN's initiative and the adoption of the Compromiso de Sevilla at the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development reflects this momentum, aiming to review mandates, strengthening global responsiveness. Similarly, the G20 must also evolve to remain inclusive, efficient, and fit for purpose. This means balancing open trade, sound economic policy, and appropriate social safeguards while strengthening collective resilience. Sustained dialogue amidst differences remains essential for global stability and for peace and prosperity. And small and medium-sized states are especially exquisitely vulnerable to global shocks, and therefore we have an outsized stake in a rules-based world order. Looking ahead, the 3G stands ready to support and will contribute to South Africa's presidency, and we will continue to submit papers and to act as a bridge between the G20 and the wider UN membership, especially the smaller states. So in closing, I just want to again make a note of appreciation, deep appreciation to South Africa for your leadership, for your cooperation, and for your partnership for the G20. And we hope that the succeeding presidencies, in particular the US, will also continue this tradition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Singapore. We now move to the United Arab Emirates. His Excellency, Mr. Said Al-Hareji, the Minister of State. You now have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
May the peace of God be upon you, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by thanking the Republic of South Africa for their invitation to this gathering today. I also wish to convey our gratitude to South Africa for their historic presidency this year, making the first ever G20 process hosted on the African continent. The G20 is one of the most critical and impactful international platforms in addressing pressing global challenges. The pillars of the G20 process are rooted in the principles of joint dialogue. These principles define the UAE's approach to international relations and common challenges. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as a guest country participating in the last 4 G20 presidencies, the UAE has witnessed firsthand the effectiveness of G20's working methods and initiatives, especially in the face of severe global challenges. The G20 has proven its ability to act quickly and to coordinate effectively in support of global stability. In this light, I would also like to commend the South African presidency for presiding over the G20 at 20 review. We are hopeful that the outcomes will define the next 20 years of more effective G20 gatherings. Excellencies,
خلال اجتماعنا اليوم على هامش الدورة 80 للجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة أود أن أؤكد التزام دولة الإمارات الثابت بالقانون الدولي واحترام سيادة الدول. ونؤمن إيمانا راسخا بأهمية السبل الدبلوماسية والسلمية في تسوية النزاعات. إننا في دولة الإمارات ملتزمون بتهدئة الأوضاع وخفض التوترات عبر تغليب الدبلوماسية والحوار المفتوح، بما يسهم في بناء التفاهم المتبادل وإيجاد حلول سلمية للصراعات. وتحقيقا لهذه الغاية أؤكد مجددا إدانة الإمارات بأشد العبارات للهجوم الإسرائيلي السافر الذي استهدف دولة قطر، إذ يشكل هذا العدوان المتهور انتهاكا صارخا لسيادة دولة قطر واعتداء خطيرا على القانون الدولي وميثاق الأمم المتحدة، وتصعيدا غير مسؤول يهدد الأمن والاستقرار الإقليمي والدولي. علاوة على ذلك، نواصل الدعوة إلى الوقف الفوري وغير المشروط لإطلاق النار في غزة، وإطلاق سراح جميع الرهائن والمعتقلين، وإيصال المساعدات الإنسانية بشكل عاجل ودون عوائق إلى المدنيين. ونرحب في هذا الإطار بالاعترافات الأخيرة بدولة فلسطين، ونظل ثابتين في إيماننا بأن لن يكون هناك سلام في المنطقة إلا بقيام دولة فلسطينية تعيش جنبا إلى جنب في أمن وسلام وكرامة مع إسرائيل. وفيما يخص الوضع في السودان فإنه لا يزال مقلقا، وإلى جانب شركائنا نواصل كدولة الإمارات جميع الجهود الرامية إلى استعادة الأمن والاستقرار في السودان، بما في ذلك من خلال البيان المشترك الصادر عن اللجنة الرباعية في 12 من سبتمبر 2025. ونواصل الدعوة إلى وقف فوري ودائم لإطلاق النار وضمان وصول المساعدات الإنسانية دون عوائق، والمضي قدما في عملية انتقالية تودي إلى قيام حكم مدني مستقل عن سيطرة الأطراف المتحاربة. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة، ومع اقتراب اختتام رئاسة جنوب أفريقيا لمجموعة ال20، أود أن أؤكد مجددا دعم الإمارات لمجموعة ال20 عبر مختلف مجموعات العمل والأولويات، بما في ذلك مساعي لإعلان قادة مجموعة ال20. ونتطلع أيضا إلى أن تسهم قمة جوهانسبرغ المقبلة في تعزيز التعاون الدولي ودعم استقرار الاقتصاد العالمي، بما يعود بالخير على المجتمع الدولي وشعوب العالم كافة.
Thank you very much, UAE. We now go to Poland. His Excellency, Mr. Rodolfo Sikorski, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, reaffirming peace as a path to sustainable economic development, the leitmotif of today's event may seem obvious, but it is remarkable that it chimes with what the founder of modern economic theory said already requisite to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence, from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice. All the rest being brought about by the natural course of things, end quote. That was, of course, Adam Smith. And by tolerable administration of justice, I think he meant our modern expression of rule of law. In Poland, communism collapsed in 1989, and since then, we were able to transform our country from a command economy to a free economy. And over the last 35 years, Poland has successfully employed the advice of Adam Smith. As a result, according to the IMF, Poland, which in the 1990s was ranked globally in the 5th 10, this year has moved to the 20th place. Poland is thus ranked second in the world as far as GDP change between 1990 and 2020 is concerned, yielding only to the People's Republic of China. Therefore, we believe we have a good story to tell, and therefore we believe that Central and Eastern Europe deserves a more prominent place in the United Nations system and other global governance fora. As the biggest economy in our region, 20th largest in the world, as I've already mentioned, Poland is ready to represent Central and Eastern Europe in these fora, in particular in the G20, where the region is absent. We have already had the honor of contributing to the G20 work on the invitation of previous presidencies, Germany, India, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia. We also have participated in the endeavors of South Africa's presidency, proudly representing the European Union as its council presidency. We are grateful to the United States for the invitation to working together in the G20 framework in 2026 and for the invitation issued to our president to attend the summit in Florida. We are ready to actively contribute to it at both political and working level, and we hope that this invitation will finally transform into Poland's permanent presence in the G20. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Poland. We will now make the only and one exception to the head of international organizations because of other pressing challenges that she has to attend to now. The WTO, Ms. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Minister Lamola. Excellencies, I want to thank South Africa for inviting us to join you here and to make these remarks. I also want to take the opportunity to thank all the ministers who've talked about the importance of multilateral trade and the WTO as exemplified by Norway and Singapore. The global trading system stands at an inflection point, the most critical in nearly 80 years. This multilateral trading system was never just about trade. It was created above all to help prevent war. Having witnessed now how a closed and divided world economy fueled depression, conflict, and ultimately the Second World War, the architects resolved to build an open and integrated world economy instead. Trade would deliver shared prosperity, interdependence would give nations a stake in one another's success. Rules would underpin stability and trust. The antidote to the zero-sum or really negative-sum policies of the 1930s was the recognition that national interests would be better served by positive-sum cooperation. And it worked pretty well. For nearly 80 years, the world has experienced unprecedented prosperity and relative peace. But success can breed complacency. I think we took open trade for granted, and we failed to adapt the system to the rapid changes in the global economy it had helped to create. Many WTO members have tabled complaints, including successive U.S. administrations, and some of these complaints are valid. Imbalances in liberalization commitments, failure to address unfair trading practices, the dispute settlement system. Developing countries feel the system is not delivering well enough for them and integrating them better, giving them policy space to develop and grow. So this crisis must be a catalyst for reform. Reform means modernizing the rule book. It means ensuring consensus decision-making, which we treasure, does not become a recipe for paralysis. It means restoring a faster, more effective dispute settlement system. Above all, it means widening the circle of countries that participate in and benefit from global trade, achieving true interdependence in trade, not overdependence, as we see in some cases now. In this regard, China's announcement 2 days ago that it will henceforth forgo access to special and differential treatment, some of the privileges accorded to developing countries at the WTO, is most welcome and helps to open the door to reform. Now, many of you have said that the trading system matters enormously, and so does the WTO. So let me end with some positive news, that in spite of the tariff actions we've seen recently, nearly 72% or 3/4 of world's goods trade still continues to go on under WTO rules. Services and digital trade continues to expand. For the overwhelming majority of economies, open and rules-based trade is not a choice, it's a necessity. In the end, the WTO reflects nothing more and nothing less than the willingness of its members to cooperate. Reforming the multilateral trading system and the WTO will need strong political will, and that will essentially needs to come from you, Excellencies, the leaders of the organization. Whether this system ultimately is reformed or the status quo continues to hold is up to you, and I know you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General of the WTO. We will now adjourn for lunch from now up until 3 o'clock. And when we return, we will continue with our speakers list, which is available on the link to the live list of the UN members and international organizations that are present. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the first session or the first segment. We are now adjourning. Thank you.